This is a Wisconsin Sports Zone update.
Well, the Brewers will look for a third straight win tonight when they take on the White Sox in Chicago. Tobias Meyer is going to be on the mound for the Crew. He'll be making his second start of the season. Gave up a couple runs over 4 innings in his debut. The White Sox going to counter with Shane Smith. He's 1-1 with a 2.30 ERA. Milwaukee took the opener last night 7-2. First pitch coming up at 6:40. Turn to the Bucks. They are officially in offseason mode following their blowing of a 7-point lead in the final 40 seconds of overtime last night to follow the Pacers in Game 5 of their series. It's the third straight year Milwaukee's gotten bounced in the first round of the playoffs. They got just one playoff series win since winning the NBA title in 2021. But Coach Doc Rivers says there is more to the story.
I'm discouraged that we lost in the first round. Obviously, no one ever tells you the whole story that Giannis in 3 years in a row, is that right? 3, right? Didn't play, but no one says that. And then this year we didn't have Dame Lillard, who's by all accounts is one of the greatest players to play the game. But we won't hear that story this summer. We'll hear that we've lost in the first round, and we'll live with that. But we know we like our team.
Bucks slated to do their exit interviews with players in the near future. A lot of people going to be focused on the future of Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
When a company only does business in Wisconsin, that's Wisconsin Strong. Rural Mutual provides all lines of insurance, including commercial, farm, home, and auto. And your premiums stay right here to keep Wisconsin strong. Local agents, local underwriters, local claims adjusters.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
Well, the Packers drafted 8 guys, signed more than a dozen undrafted free agents this past weekend. They'll get to see those guys on the field together for the first time this weekend as they hold their rookie minicamp in Green Bay. With this Wisconsin Sports Zone Network update, I'm Zach Heil, Print.
To Green, Trent with it, and he loses it on a brilliant night. Gary Trent Jr. has it roll off of his fingertips. Here we go. Halliburton, 5 seconds, 4 seconds. Halliburton for the lead. 1.3 to go. Pacers by 1. Porter to inbound it, no. Giannis is going to take it now. Here's Gary Trent Jr. Lets it fly. And the Pacers are moving on.
Ladies and gentlemen, from the great state of Brooklyn, Neil Diamond.
God bless you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Here's your host, Grant Bills.
I really love the idea of someone tuning in to one of our radio affiliates at 4 o'clock and having no concept of what the show is, and then hearing the final call last night. That's the NBA TV call of the Bucks loss. And then the audio immediately changes to Neil Diamond. Like there's a lot of context needed to understand for why that made sense. But I think most people here get it. I hope. You could argue this Neil Diamond week, we've needed Neil more this week than we ever have before. You could also argue that Neil this week is more inappropriate than ever before because we've been talking about Damian Lillard blowing out his Achilles and now the Bucks season ending and what that means for the future of their franchise. You could say that that the presence of Neil Diamond this week is tone deaf. I think it's the opposite. I think we need Neil more now than we've ever needed him the past 4 years that we've done. This is a 5th annual Neil Diamond week. How about that? So I'm choosing to feel the Neil through the pain. I think it's been a great coping mechanism. But that's just me.
Good Lord!
It's also my show. So I'm the only one whose opinion really matters at the end of the day. I hope you're having an excellent night. Day 3, Neil Diamond Week 2025. And we say goodbye to the 2024-2025 Bucks tonight. Not a total surprise. They didn't show particularly well in the series. And I thought going into this series that they could win. And then I watched the 2 games in Indy, and I know the series doesn't start until the home team loses a game, but I watched those first 2 games. I'm like, yeah, kind of reevaluating some things. So we didn't necessarily know if the season would come to an end last night. I kind of had a feeling, but if not last night, then at some point very soon. This is not a shock to Bucks fans. So that's where we begin tonight. My name is Grant Bills. This is the Wisco Sports Show. And I'll begin, Bucks fans, to take your call. If you have something to say after our first commercial break, we'll get into some phone calls. 608-321-1670. A lot to dig into last night. The actual basketball game. There's a lot that went down at the end, and we could talk X's and O's and lineup decisions and some of the switch-ups that Doc made. I actually thought the switch-ups that Doc made last night obviously were very helpful. But then you could complain as to why he didn't make those adjustments earlier. Lost in it all is Giannis went for 30, 20, 10, 2, and 2 last night. The quietest 30, 20, 10 game you've ever seen in the playoffs. And like I said, 2 blocks and 2 steals go along with it. And by Giannis standards, actually shot pretty darn well from the free throw line. Started to run out of gas at the end. I'm surprised he could still stand at the end of that game. So we could talk about the basketball side of it. We could talk about the events at the end of the game with Tyrese Halliburton's dad down on the floor. I'm going to give you my 2 cents on that at 5 o'clock. We're going to save that. If you have something to say about it, again, you're more than welcome. I'm not going to patrol and censor your phone calls. You can talk about whatever at any time. Yeah, I prefer you to have a little bit, like, don't call in and talk Packers when we're in the middle of a Bucks segment. You get my point. So I'm going to give you my thoughts on the end of the game and Tyrese Halliburton's dad at 5 o'clock. We can also, of course, talk about what this means for the Bucks franchise, big picture and into the future. So there's the basketball game itself, the dramatics and the theatrics after the game, and then what comes next for the Bucks. It's all on the table. Jesse Temple going to be here at the very end of the show to talk a little NFL draft and the Badgers' role in that draft, which was very limited this year, which is mostly what we discuss at the end of the show. And whatever comes up with the Packers or the Brewers, we'll discuss that as well. I was pretty jaded about the Bucks during last night's show, even because the game started at 5. Because, of course, God forbid any of these games just start at a normal, sensible time. It's either 4 in the afternoon or noon on a Saturday or 8:30 on a Sunday night. None of the start times have made sense at all, but whatever. That's beside the point. Even when they were up 30-13 to start the game yesterday in the first quarter, I wasn't doing jumping jacks on the show. I'm like, okay, we'll see. I was pretty jaded. I was ready for the Bucks to be done because they're not good enough. And we saw that after the first 2 games. And then once Dame got hurt, it's like, let's bring this to a close before anybody else gets hurt. Let's stop wasting everybody's time. But of course, even when we had all, I think, waved the white flag, except for maybe Uncle Packer, they found a way last night to make it as painful as possible. That literally hurt my body. That physically pained me to watch that finish. They blew multi-possession leads in the final minute of overtime and in the final minute of regulation. They were up 4 with 53 seconds to go in regulation, and then they were up 7 with 40 seconds to go. And I think they had the ball. I can't remember exactly, but up 7 with or without the ball, that's a game you should win in overtime. They can't get a stop when they need to save their life, to literally save their season. And that's so painful. It's infuriating to watch a team. It's like you need one stop and you just can't get it. It's so difficult to watch, even when they're scoring. Right? Even when they're doing other things well, it's like you guys can't bear down and get one stop when you need to. That was a theme throughout the series, especially last night. And then for the ball to go through Gary Trent's hands like that, it was like watching the end of Wisconsin-Oregon earlier this spring, or I guess late this last winter, that Saturday game where everything had to go wrong at the end. And of course, everything went wrong at the end. It was painful to watch that finish. And I was ready for the Bucks to be done. Sorry to use a rather, what's the word I'm looking for? Morbid analogy, but it's like a hospice patient. Like, we knew this was coming to an end, and the Bucks still found a way to get me last night and to make it painful. Wisconsin sports fans love to internalize that experience. It's like, oh, between the Brewers and the Packers, and I'm guilty of this too, especially because the Brewers had a 2-run lead in the 9th and they blew it. So it wasn't, a totally new feeling for Wisconsin sports fans. But Wisconsin sports fans I saw on Twitter last night, like, oh, only this crap happens to us. It happens to everybody. Every team that makes the postseason goes through painful losses. It's not just Wisconsin, but with the way that Brewer game ended back in October, it's hard not to internalize it as a Wisconsin sports fan. Brutal way for the season to end, even when we knew the season was going to end. Who knows what's next? We'll talk more about that, and we'll talk more about the dramatics with Tyrese Halliburton's dad. I want to talk about that at 5 o'clock. But the most annoying thing to me last night, and this is where I want to begin, the most annoying thing to me last night were all of the takes being thrown around on the internet. And I realized that the internet is not a real place. So if you're never on social media, and let's say the only sports talk that you consume is this station that you're listening to, okay, well, maybe you don't experience these takes in this conversation, but the sports talkers and the sports fans talking about the Bucks last night, I saw a lot of takes being thrown around about how the Bucks have wasted Giannis's prime. I quote tweeted a tweet from Nathan Hubbard, who does a lot of stuff at The Ringer. I know he does a golf podcast, and I think he was doing the Taylor Swift podcast with Nora Princiotti at the time, which my sister loved. So I never listened to it, but I'm sure Swifties, he tweeted last night, said, I'm with @Ben Thompson. No Tech Ben. You might know that Bucks Twitter account. He's on the Bill Simmons pod sometimes. He said, hard to identify a team that has wasted a better player in his prime than the Bucks ever, which I quote tweeted and said, they won Milwaukee's first title in 50 years. I realized that was a whole 4 years ago now. I know, ancient history. But there's some great players who never win a title. Lots of great teams that never win a title. Now, I understand Giannis is one of the best players of all time, so he is in rare air. But they won a title in Milwaukee. And as I said yesterday and the day before, that makes this era on some level, and you can argue on what level, but on some level, this era was a success. I think it was a huge success. If you'd have told me, in 18 and 19, when they started to get good and they were coached by Coach Bud, if you'd have told me they're going to win a title, I'd say, take it. Yes. Great. I'm thrilled. But so many people talking last night and today about how the Bucks have wasted Giannis's prime. I think that's inaccurate. And even worse, I think that's a symptom of how sports fans are wired to think and talk in 2025 in this current era of sports consumption and fandom and sports media that we live in. Because if a team doesn't win, it simply must be because they didn't draft this guy, or they didn't sign this guy, or they didn't trade for this guy, or they didn't give a contract to this guy. Somebody messed up, right? And I think we're conditioned by shows like First Take, strong opinions, hot takes, which is fun. But a symptom of all that sports talk is when a team loses, we need to aggressively blame someone, right? Like, who's going to be in our sights? Who do we got to put in the crosshairs? And who do we have to yell at? And who do we have to blame? And who's got to pay, right? Who's the scapegoat here? And sometimes someone is to blame. But sometimes, and this is what we never, ever get in 2025, sometimes it just doesn't work out. Sometimes for good teams, great teams with great players and great coaches, sometimes it doesn't work out. And as sports fans and sports talkers in this modern era of hot takes and debate shows, which again, I love, but in this modern era, we have a very hard time admitting that. Because sometimes as sports fans or sports talkers or people who debate sports with our friends, sometimes you just got to say, you know what, that was a great team. It just didn't happen for them. It's not because the front office didn't do their job. It's not because a coach didn't do that. The other team was better on that night. The other team's player had the game of their life. The other team stepped up and made big plays. This team didn't. You know what I mean? And when you say that a team wasted a player's prime, to me, you imply that the team didn't do everything in their power to try to win and to support that player and to surround that player, right? I think when you say, well, they wasted that player, what you're saying is they didn't do everything that they could. They didn't push every button and pull every lever. You imply that that team didn't do absolutely everything in their power to try to win. That's what that means, right? Like, let's use the Packers as an example. A lot of people say that the Packers wasted Aaron Rodgers' prime. I think there are instances with the Packers. Could have used free agency a little bit more under Ted Thompson at the end. Totally. You could have drafted differently here and there. Could have made trades. The Marshawn Lynch trade is something that a lot of people still hold on to, and I think with good reason. That's legit. You can go through the Aaron Rodgers era of Packers football and say, I would have liked this, or I would have viewed it, try a little bit harder here. Maybe you don't draft a quarterback when Aaron Rodgers is still winning MVPs. That's all fair. I also think that the Packers had lots of great teams that just didn't get the job done. You know what I mean? 2014, I think that team was good enough. They didn't get the job done. 2020 against the Bucks, that team was good enough. They didn't get the job done. 2021 against the Niners, I don't know. It's hard to tell because they didn't even get to the championship round, but I thought that team was pretty good. And again, they just didn't get the job done, right? But with the Bucks, moving off of the example with the Packers, because I think a lot of people have a gripe with the Packers. They could have done ABC and they didn't. That's fair. But with the Bucks, show me the button that they didn't push. Point to the lever they didn't pull. They spent all the money. They traded all the picks. They did all the things you want a franchise to do when they're on the cusp or when they have a great player, right? The Bucks traded for Eric Bledsoe once upon a time. And I know ancient history, that was like, 6 years ago, 7 years ago? That was a big deal at the time. That was a win now move. And it paid dividends for them. But that wasn't good enough. Eric Bledsoe is their starting point guard, put a ceiling on them in the playoffs. So what did they do? They went out and they got Drew Holiday. They made another big move. And that helped win them a title. And then 2 postseasons later, when it became clear, we need a little bit more offense. We can't rely on Drew Holiday to be a number 2 if there's an injury. We can't rely on him. So they go out and get Damian Lillard in a move that everyone celebrated. And I know everybody likes to rewrite history. I never would have done that. They should have kept Drew. I think that's unfair. And I think it's inaccurate, but I definitely think it's unfair. They basically, without fault, every year at the deadline, used whatever shekels, whatever pennies they had, second-round picks or whatever, to go and add a player, to go and get another piece at the deadline, which is what you would hope and what you would want from a contending team with a generational superstar. They fired Mike Budenholzer when everybody under the sun agreed that it was the right move. Now, people want to go back and rewrite history about that. I won't allow it because I think, again, that's inaccurate and unfair. Everybody thought Bud should have been fired that year. He was fired. Now, they hired Adrian Griffin, who sucked, but that doesn't mean that firing Bud and moving off of Bud was the wrong choice. And then when it became clear very quickly that Adrian Griffin wasn't the guy, they fired his ass too in the middle of the season, and they moved on from him. They were aggressive. They didn't sit back and waste a year on a coach that they didn't think was good enough. They didn't worry about paying multiple coaches. They went out and got Doc Rivers, who was probably the best of a lot of bad options because it was the middle of the year. Right. So the Bucks in the Giannis era, they were hurt by injuries. And they didn't play their best in some games where they needed their best. Giannis was not good enough against the Raptors in 18 and 19. Neither was Middleton. In the bubble, they just didn't perform good enough, right? In the first round against the Heat 2 years ago, I know Giannis tweaked his back, but that team didn't have it. They weren't made of the right stuff. They didn't perform well enough. The rest of the years, I think were mostly defined by injuries, and I can't really put that on John Horst. In fact, the Damian Lillard trade was to help insulate against injuries. And the problem is Damian Lillard got hurt. And guess what? If your first and second best player are constantly hurt in the postseason, it doesn't really matter who's the coach. It doesn't really matter who you draft or what you're doing on the fringes. You're just not going to win, right? So injuries hurt them, and they didn't play their best in some games where they needed to play their best. But I think it's insane, although all too symptomatic of sports fandom and sports talk in 2025, to say they wasted Giannis's prime. I think that's silly. And I'm not convinced that Giannis is leaving. When they lost last night, I'm like, probably flip a coin. You know, Giannis might ask out. If he's ever going to do it, this is probably the time, and I wouldn't really blame him. But the more that I sit here today and I've been, writing down things for the show, I'm like, man, I still don't think Giannis is going to leave. I just don't think he has an appetite for that. I could be wrong. But I still don't think the Giannis era is for sure done in Milwaukee, like many people do. And I certainly don't think they wasted Giannis's prime. I think that's something that we've been conditioned to say in a very aggressive sports talk culture in 2025, where we always need to blame someone. When sometimes you just got to say, you know what, it didn't work out. The players who are the good players, the best players, they didn't play their best when their best was required. It's not necessarily the front or the fault of the front office or a coach. It's just the reality of sports. But we're really bad at that in 2025, saying, you know what, shucks, 2 good teams played. One good team played a little better and they won. We always need to blame someone. They wasted Giannis's prime. I don't think that's fair or remotely accurate, but I've seen it a lot over the last, 18 hours or so ever since the game ended last night. Bucks fans, if you have something to add, we'll come back. We'll listen to a little Neil Diamond to help buoy the mood. Thank God for Neil Diamond and Neil Diamond Week this week as we say goodbye to our Bucks. 2-year phone calls, Bucks fans, next. 608-321-1670.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Neil Diamond Week 2025 continues. We use the show tonight to say goodbye to our Bucks. A lot of different angles of last night's game and the Bucks that we can get into. And I'm going to get to your phone calls here in a minute. I gave you my thought in the opening segment about this idea that's getting thrown around. Well, the Bucks have wasted Giannis's prime. And they weren't perfect. But there are plenty of teams like the Nuggets / payroll around Jokic. You know what I mean? They're like, we don't want to pay KPJ. Or Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. KCP, whatever. We didn't want to pay him. The Bucks have been a second apron team. They've traded all the picks. They've done all the things. They just didn't win. Maybe as many series as they should. But I don't really think it's the fault of the Bucks organization like everyone's saying. I think everybody, Giannis and a lot of the players, and then injury luck. I think that's a lot to blame. I'm going to give you my thoughts on the incident after the game coming up at 5 o'clock. Doesn't mean that you can't talk about it, though. 608-321-1670 to your phone calls as promised. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
It's Tim from Sparta.
Hey, Tim. What's going on?
First time I think I've ever been up first.
No kidding.
I want to point out that I believe I was the first person on your show to say what they need to do is go get Damian Lillard, but they'll never do it because it's the right thing to do.
Interesting. Yeah, I feel like I remember that. Dame was always thought of as this perfect fit, and then when they made the trade, it's like, wow, this is going to be... And it just hasn't been. But I don't want to rewrite history and say that trade sucked now. No. That's not fair to anybody.
No. I mean, that was as close as, I thought it was the perfect fit. So you can, if you want to blame somebody, blame me, because obviously they were listening to the show the day that I told you that. So it's all my fault.
Tim and Sparta.
But you can't go back and rewrite history. You just can't do it. It doesn't work well. In the real world, it doesn't work that way. The Bucks have done what they could do. I don't think there's any question about that. You can argue that point till kingdom come, but you're an idiot if you do. This is kind of like Vagabond John defending the previous defensive coordinator.
Careful, don't say his name. He'll appear. He'll appear out. He's like Beetlejuice.
That's okay. I love him to death.
I do too.
You know, he's like a terrier. Once you get something in your teeth, you can't ever let it go.
Correct. That is correct.
And you just can't do it.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't. It's like ask Charles Barkley, ask Wilt Chamberlain if he wanted more than one in all of the great years that he had. Ask Stockton and Malone if they think that they were terrible players and their careers were wasted because they could never get past Jordan.
Yeah.
I mean, you can pick your superstar, and sometimes you just are unlucky.
Yeah.
It just is the way it is. So no, I don't think that you can blame Bucks management for this one at all.
Yeah, and I don't think it's all luck. Tim, that's a good call. Nice to hear from you. Some of the years were luck. They were hurt. I think 2021 is the perfect year where it's like if Middleton had been healthy, I feel like they might have been in the finals again. Giannis was playing at the top of his game. He was seeing red, playing with as much confidence as I've ever seen coming off of that finals run. So there's a bad luck year. Last year was everyone was hurt. And then Dame blowing his Achilles, blood clot, bad luck. There were also years against the Raptors, they just weren't good enough. Individual players, they weren't at the level they needed to be. Can't put that on Bucks ownership. You know what I mean? 2 years ago in Bud's final year against the Heat, they just didn't show up. They got punked. That's the fault of the players and the coach too, which is why he got fired. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Grant, happy Neil Diamond week. Happy Wednesday.
Happy Neil
I think
Diamond
the perfect song right now by Neil to sum this up. It's on a more positive note. It's America. You know, that song is Giannis' story.
Yeah.
Some no-name from overseas comes to America, you know, comes into generational wealth, becomes an absolute, you know, Milwaukee legend, NBA legend. So I think it's a good song for today.
I think so too. I liked listening to Giannis in his postgame last night. He talked about his dad and he rambled a little bit. It wasn't bad. He went a little bit longer than I thought he needed to about Tyrese Halliburton's dad and that incident. But I liked when Jamal Collier of ESPN, who I'm trying to get on with Bill this week. He's a little busy, as you could imagine. He was in Indy last night, but he asked like, hey, do you think you can win a championship here? And I like how Giannis basically punted. He's like, look, whatever I say here, it's going to get dissected. I'm just not going to answer that question right now. Giannis, if nothing else, continues to have a lot of poise in his pressers and give pretty good answers. And we'll hear a little bit from him as the show goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. Total pro. Like I said, build a statue now, even if he never plays another minute for the Milwaukee Bucks. You know, I am starting to get into the camp that you trade him.
Yeah, I just think it depends. And Colin, that's a great call. If Giannis comes to Bucks ownership and says, look, I'd like to be traded, and I feel pretty strongly about that, and I've talked with my family, and this is something that I've thought about a lot, and I think it's best for both sides, then I think you can proceed. And you can find some sort of compensation package that puts the Bucks in a lot better spot moving forward. They won't have a player like Giannis, but they won't be completely left in the lurch. And by the way, they just won a title. Like, with what Giannis has given them, a title among years and years and years and multiple contracts of high-level basketball play, I'm not going to hold it against him, and I think most won't. But if Giannis wants to stay and keep playing through this thing, like, no, I'm not going to trade him. I'm not going to be proactive about getting rid of a top 15 player of all time. When it looks like he's still in his prime, he had 30, 20, 10, 2-2 last night, which is getting lost in the shuffle. I understand with good reason because they lost, and now we pivot to the offseason, and Halliburton's dad made a stink after the game, so that's getting talked about too. He had 30, 20, 10 last night. 2 steals, 2 blocks. So unless he wants to go, I'm not shipping him out. If he wants to go, though, silver lining, Bucks fans, is you're going to get a big haul, and you're going to recoup a lot of the resources that were spent going all in around Giannis, which is the point of my opening segment. Like, how can you say the Bucks wasted Giannis' prime when they traded all the picks and spent all the money? They were consistently a second apron tax team. They upgraded from Bledsoe to Holiday to Lillard. They fired Bud when everyone said it was the right move. They fired Griffin when it was clear he wasn't the guy. Like, they have been aggressive and pushed every button and pulled every string that they possibly could have. And yeah, maybe they could have got back to or won another title, but I don't think that's completely and totally the fault of the incompetent Bucks, like so many people are saying. Line number 3, I was about to come for you, and you dropped off. You got to give me time if you're on hold. 608-321-1670. If you want to call right back, I'll get you on before this break. If there's any texts, I can get to them quickly. Duncan Holman says, why couldn't Neil Diamond be on the Edmund Fitzgerald? See, that's just in poor taste. You know what else is in poor taste? And I almost tweeted this today. But so John Elway, I don't know if you saw the story today, was with his friend and longtime agent golfing, and he crashed the golf cart, or something happened where his agent fell off the golf cart. I guess he hit his head and later died. He died today of his injury. And in poor taste, I can't help but think, like, it's insane that of the 2 quarterbacks that played in Super Bowl 32, John Elway is somehow having the worst week of them both. considering the trailer that came out for The Fall of Favre yesterday. Like, actually, the other guy's doing worse. Pretty insane. Speaking again of poor taste. Coyote Mike sending in a Neil Diamond song. Rosemary's Wine. I'm not sure that I'm familiar with that one. Maybe we'll play it after this break. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, Grant, John here.
Hey, Tom. What's going on? Where are you calling from, Tom? Have we talked before?
It's John, and it's actually John from south of Eau Claire, so it's been a hot minute since we've spoken.
Awesome, John. What's going on?
Well, I kind of disagree with you on the Drew Holiday situation. I thought that was a very bad move on the Bucks because he was such a great player and such a lockdown defender. And when we lost him, I thought we lost a little tenacity on the Bucks and like that. And now what we're seeing here is with Damian Lillard being gone, we just lost everything.
So let me ask you this: because this is what matters, John. It's John, right? South of Eau Claire, you said. I just want to make sure I got it right.
Correct.
If they had kept Drew, do you think they would have gotten back to another finals? There's no right or wrong answer. I'm not trying to paint you into a corner. I'm just curious.
I honestly do. I thought that was the nail on the coffin that didn't get him any farther. I thought he was when we picked him up. That was the first person that brought us over the edge and got us that first championship. And then by losing him, that's why we haven't gotten out of the first round since.
So it's a small sample size to deal with, or a relatively small sample size. John, that's a great call. And it's a reasonable point. Like, I would have been interested to see what it would have looked like had they kept Drew. All right. We really only have 2 years to look at because post-finals, they then lost to the Celtics, and then they lost to the Heat in round one. The Celtics series in 2022, I think, was a big data point in why the Bucks felt comfortable or felt that it was necessary to move on from Drew for a better option, because when Middleton went down, Drew was not able to step up and be the number 2 over the course of an entire series that they needed to beat another good team. Okay. So that was data point number 1. And then the next year, when Giannis gets banged up, again, Drew really didn't provide the necessary offense. He wasn't giving them what they needed. Now, if you make the case that Drew instead of Dame against the Pacers last year would have made the difference, or this year, you can feel that way. I don't agree, but I can't tell you that you're wrong because you'll never know. I have said of the Drew versus Dame conversation for basically a year now, because when they lost in the postseason last year, it's like, I can't defend. Why'd they ever get rid of Drew? And those arguments were only made stronger when Drew wins a championship with the Celtics, right? I think we all know that Drew is playing a very different role in Boston, and his situation there versus his situation in Milwaukee and what he was being asked to do, very different, right? But still, he wins the title with the Celtics, who are a rival. It looks bad. The Bucks appear to be in shambles. So I understand why it's a talking point. I have said really since the Bucks were bounced in last year's postseason, the Celtics won the title, I said, look, if they had kept Drew, they would also be losing in the postseason. It would just look different. And I think I still hold that belief. I don't think the Bucks would have gotten any farther last year or this year with Drew instead of Dame. We have no way of knowing that, which is why John's opinion is a fine one. I just think it would have looked different. It would have been a different type of loss. The struggle of the last 2 years would have been a different looking struggle. And Drew's dealt with injuries. Like he's got, I can't remember the name of the injury. So I won't bother trying to remember it, but he's been banged up. It's not like Drew has been this clean bill of health, but no one puts Drew under a microscope because he's like the 5th or maybe 6th most important player. I think most Celtics fans feel like, actually, Peyton Pritchard's, pretty important, and won 6th Man of the Year this year. If you think it would have gone differently with Drew, it's a fine opinion to have. It's not like it's gone great with Dame. I also don't think it would have gone good with Drew. I just think it would have looked different. They would have lost in a different form and fashion. That's my take. It's just an opinion because we'll never know. They traded him away, and we have no way of knowing what the last 2 years would have looked like. Cone Roller texts in. Here's a good topic. You'd be blank if the Brewers did for Chourio what the Bucks did for Giannis. So two different sports, and it's difficult to cross sports. Put it this way. Cone, are you asking if Chourio wins a title and that's all for the Brewers? Like, I'll be over the moon. I'll be even happier for the Brewers than I was for the Bucks. Not because I like one more team than the other, but I think it's an even bigger accomplishment for the Brewers to win a championship than the Bucks. And it was pretty friggin' hard for the Bucks to win a title. It was 50 years in between. The fact that they have any, like the Pacers don't have any titles. There's plenty of teams that are similar to the Bucks, or even in larger markets than the Bucks, that don't have any titles at all. If Chourio has any sort of career like Giannis is, of course, including a title, I'll be over the moon. I just don't know if you can compare the Brewers going all in around a superstar The same way that you can compare a basketball team going all in around a superstar. I think the sports are too different where that comp just, it's not even possible. But if Chourio brings any sort of career and success to the Brewers like Giannis did, like, yeah, it's a massive success. It's an even bigger success because winning at a high level is even harder for a Brewers team in that market size than it is for the Bucks. Let's take a break. We'll come back. Maybe a comment or two from Giannis. If you have any thoughts on what's going on with the Packers or the Brewers with a very important win last night. Lost in it all this week. The Brewers are in a very important stretch of games against a very beatable White Sox team, and then a huge series with the Cubs, who've been playing very well in their own right, smacking the hell out of the ball coming up this weekend. So we'll continue the Wisco Sports Show next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 5 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Do you think that you can still win that second championship here in Milwaukee after a third straight first round exit?
Look, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do this. I know how this going to, whatever I say, I know how it's going to translate. I don't know, man. I wish I was still playing. I wish I was still like going back to Milwaukee. I don't know.
It's a fair answer. That's Giannis last night after the game. He could have said no comment, but I think he commented, but also didn't give a comment. He didn't no comment. He just gave a comment that wasn't a comment. I think there is a difference. Saying, look, it's the heat of the moment. Whatever I say right now is going to be cut up and dissected, and I don't want that. It's not my intention. So instead of trying to say something that's a nothing burger, I'll just give you a nothing burger. But a nothing burger is still more than a no comment, if that makes sense. I'll give you my thoughts on the odds that Giannis is going to stick around. At 5 o'clock, I'll give you my reaction to John Halliburton's little adventure onto the court last night. And I have a comment from Jim Ozarski, who was on Bill's show earlier today, covers the Bucks for the Journal-Sentinel. Very, very well-reasoned, thought-out individual. I have about a minute and 20 seconds of him talking about what this offseason could look like for Giannis. But first, we're going to sneak a phone call in. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Grant, it is Q.
Q!
And I'm not on like suicide watch or anything. I'm doing okay.
You seemed pretty bummed on Bill's, or not Bill's stream, on Bart's stream the other night. So I was a little worried, but I'm glad to hear you.
Yeah, that was rough. That was a rough game to be at. I just saw everything we hoped for and dreamed for crash before our eyes when Damian Lillard was sitting on the floor knowing that he had just torn his Achilles tendon. Super bummed. And I guess where I've landed on this is I'm excited for next year. I mean, like, would I have written this script? No. Like, it sucks. Like, it's nice to be competing for a championship next year, but this team has been under so much pressure the last 7 years. And then it's felt like we've been under a microscope ever since we won the championship. And it'll be nice to have kind of a rebuilding year. Like with the roster as constructed today, I think we're probably right in the wheelhouse of a 5 or a 6 seed. There's some nice young pieces that are there if we can retain them. And I'm just excited to see what John Horst has in store for this roster now that he has some extra flexibility because we're under that second apron. All of that being said, like, Giannis has a big decision to make. I don't think he's going to abandon this franchise. I think he's in it for the long haul. But I think everything I just described assumes he's coming back. And for the people that want to trade him or saying that we should tanking doesn't really make sense if you don't control your draft picks.
Yeah, they have a little bit of a misnomer, and you might even know this better than me, Q. They are not completely without picks. There's a difference between controlling your draft picks and not having picks. They have more picks than I think most people think over the next couple of years, but they have pick swaps with other teams. So if the Bucks tank and they end up with the second overall pick, that pick would go to somebody else and they would then get the later pick, right? Like, it's not that they're totally without picks, but some of them are swaps. So they don't control their own picks, which means that losing is not advantageous to them at all.
Correct. So we have no picks this year. Like, we don't have pick swaps in 25. but in 26 we have pick swaps with New Orleans Pelicans.
That's right.
So whoever finishes lower or worse off, like the Pelicans would get that pick. So like, I think that the soonest we have our own draft pick is like 2032, which is a movable piece this offseason. But I don't think we have enough draft capital or pieces to like get out of the Dame contract. But I mean, even the things that he's saying, like through Chris Haynes, like, I'm going to hit this, like, rehab hard. Like, I'm optimistic that maybe he'll come back. But I mean, he's pushing, like, what is he going to be? Like 35, 36 years old? Like, he's not going to be.
He'll probably be pushing 37 by the time he comes back. I don't doubt that he'll hit it hard. Dame, look, I know this hasn't gone exactly according to many hopes and dreams, to use your phrase, Q. I have very few questions about Dame's work ethic and attitude. Like, that guy's wired the right way. I just don't know that matters enough for him to come back from this injury and be any sort of significant piece for the Bucks trying to contend. You know what I mean?
But I guess I would say it's similar to your takes on Jair, like yesterday, where like, we're better to have Jair in any capacity than trading him for nothing or releasing him for nothing.
Yeah. Yep.
Like the idea of getting out of Dame's contract, like this offseason, we would get next to nothing. So
you'd probably have to give up something. You'd probably get worse than nothing.
Yeah, you would. It would be a net negative.
Yeah.
But if there's a chance he can come back, and this is like a playoff team, like let's say next March or April, like, and there's a chance he can contribute like even a little bit, that's probably like the best thing we have going. Are we going to be a championship contender? No. Could we sneak out of the first round, which we haven't done in the last 3 years? Absolutely. So, and the last optimistic note that I have is it's not an Olympic offseason, so Giannis should be like even more rested than he was last year. And it seems like he's going into the offseason on a healthy note, which we couldn't say at this time last year. So in a sea of Bucks doom and gloom, I thought I'd be a beacon of hope for next year.
Yeah, look, and Q, we could talk more, but I'm going to let you go. Part of why my optimism is limited is because if Doc Rivers is the coach of this team next year, I'm like, okay, what am I supposed to be configuring in my head? Like, what do you want me to tell myself? What do you want me to try to rationalize and give it? Well, you know, if this, that, and the other thing, when Doc Rivers is standing there, you know what I mean? Like, if he's running the thing, what am I supposed to try to talk myself into? Even if it's Giannis and a bunch of shooters and defenders, which can work. You had 30, 20, 10, 2, and 2 last night. Like, the Giannis and a bunch of shooters works just like LeBron and a bunch of shooters worked really well for a long time. But if the coach is Doc, like, I don't know. Here's Jim Ozarski earlier on Bill's show talking about what this offseason holds for Giannis.
You know, the Horst extension is low-key an indicator of Giannis' trust in the organization, and John has done a good job of, you know, having this team be competitive. And that, you know, Bill, it's funny because Giannis, national folks want to pin, you know, Giannis's comments about wanting to win a second title, meaning he cannot do it in Milwaukee. The counter to that is Milwaukee's one of 7 places to win a title in the last 7 years. Mm-hmm. Who's to say, right? Like just in his mind or like the actual basketball thoughts, like who's to say him remaining with the Bucks doesn't make the Bucks a championship contender, right? So I think that's where Bucks fans have to be. I wrote this at jsonline.com, Bill. They've got, depending on options and opt-outs and trade exceptions, all that boring stuff, they're going to have $30 to $60 million to work with between the cap and the tax. And while I don't think ownership is going to pay the luxury tax next year, Bill, because let's face it, are they going to be a championship favorite?
Right.
Probably not. But that's still a lot of money. And look, there's still a chance to retool this on the fly. I'm sure you and I will do a live stream together, and we could get into all the nitty gritty. But I think Giannis is here. I think Doc is here. John Horst is here. And it may end up just being another boring offseason for the Milwaukee Bucks with some trades and moves around the edges as they kind of
reimagine a roster without Dame for this year for sure, but keeping it around Giannis. And I think there's a lot about Giannis' play without Dame, Bill, that this team can draw from and say, wow, if we move in this direction, we could look this way and win this way. And that's, I think, where John's going to go.
So that's Jim Ozarski earlier. I didn't see this. Share this before we go to break. This is from Kyle Malzahn of Channel 5 up in Green Bay. Wisconsin native Tyrese Halliburton was on the Pat McAfee show today and said he was supposed to throw out the first pitch at a Brewer game last summer, but after eliminating the Bucks in the postseason, the Brewers revoked the offer, so he's no longer a fan of the Brew Crew. Why would you want to go out there? You're just going to get booed. I just thought that was funny. I saw that during the break. Hell yeah. Good for the Brewers. At 5 o'clock, I'll give you my take on Halliburton and his pops after the game. Something that I'm excited to talk about when we come back. Couple minutes on the Brewers. Big week for them. We'll discuss next as we wrap up hour number 1.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
I want to tell you, when I get a chance to do a show, we do everything so that those people have a good time and they want to come back again. I would take no chances with losing my audience to some young whippersnapper.
Wisco Sports Show, wrapping up hour number 1. It's Neil Diamond Week. Day number 3, love this week. Might be my favorite week of the year. Coming up after Zach's update at 5 o'clock, I'll give you my take on Tyrese Halliburton and his paw and whatever the heck that was last night. Excited to get into that. Fun little side story. A fun little dash of flavor to a Bucks loss that was a bummer. It's like, oh, what happened on the court? Something crazy, and our guy, it seems, was in the right. All right. Fun little extra juicy topic for us to chew on. A quick Brewers Minute in the meantime. This is a huge week for them, and I talked about this last night. You got to get 2 or 3 against the White Sox. A sweep would be great. Like, by the way, the most basic, casual baseball take to have on sports radio when your team plays a bad team. You got to at least take 2 out of 3. A sweep would be great, but at least you got to take 2 out of 3. I know I'm not telling you much there. Like, I'm not breaking new ground or shattering new earth with that take. But this is a huge series because they've been kind of scuffling and they've been humming around 500 to slightly below 500. And a lot of nights it's been underwhelming. It's like Vinny Capra, who's in the midst of not necessarily a Craig Counsell-esque stretch, but he's on his way. It's a lot of Vinny Capra and Caleb Durbin and Joey Ortiz. And then Garrett Mitchell's hurt. So, like, what are we doing at the other outfield spot? That was kind of supposed to be a position of strength. Is the trio of Yelich, Contreras, and Churio doing enough? Like, is that top of the order or middle of the order? Is that going to be enough? What's going on with Bryce Terang? Is the bullpen going to be able to hold up? I think the focus now shifts from, do they have enough healthy pitchers to, do they have enough good pitchers? That's going to become a conversation. This week is massive because the White Sox are a very beatable team, and they wasted a couple great opportunities against the Cardinals, who were a beatable team over the weekend. So you got to make hay while the sun is shining on the south side. And then they have a huge weekend series against the Cubs. And if the Cubs blast you like they've been blasting the ball and blasting everybody for the last couple of weeks, like, again, their season's far from done. We're not even to May yet. But it starts to really paint a clear picture in the NL Central. And it starts to paint a pretty clear picture. Starts to paint a pretty clear picture of the Brewers. It's like, you have some good players, but you don't have enough. You're going to be a team that kind of scuffles around 500. At some point before too long, let's say before Memorial Day, which is the first day where we're officially allowed to check the standings. It's always a thrilling day on the show when we see where teams are falling in their respective divisions. But I'll give it a loose cutoff point of before Memorial Day. Can you win 5 of 6? Can you win 8 of 10? Can you win 13 of 50? Like, do you have that in you? I don't expect the Brewers to win at that pace for an entire season. Even the best teams in baseball don't win at that pace. That's not the point. The point is, can you show that you have it in you to get hot where we can watch you for 2 weeks and go, that's what it looks like? Like, if everything is firing and everything is clicking and going like the best case scenario, how you would draw it up. It's like, if this Brewers team is going to go on a run and win games in the postseason, this, and these things have to happen. Can those things all happen for a 2-week stretch? Can I see it? I mean, very, very Bill Simmons concept here. I'd like to see it. Can I see it for 10 days, for a month? Can I see it for a month, right? Something like that. I just need to see what the best case version of this team is. Because if you just hover around 500 and you win a series here, but, I just wonder if this is a team that can get off the runway. Or if they're just going to scuffle along at or slightly above or slightly below 500. Like, I want to see what cruising altitude looks like for this team. Can I see the best case scenario for this team for 2 weeks? And with the White Sox and then the Cubs this weekend, this would be a hell of a time to do it. You could have a bad week and then fire it up next week. Yes, totally. But this seems like a very important week and what could be a turning point for the first portion of the Brewers season, at least. This stretch isn't going to define what they do, come September. But for right now, like, this would be a good time to fire on all cylinders and see the best version of this team possibly. 2-minute update from Zach. We'll be right back. Hour 2.
This is a Wisconsin Sports Zone update.
Well, the Brewers will look for a third straight win tonight when they take on the White Sox in Chicago. Tobias Myers going to be on the mound for the Crew. He'll be making his second start of the season. Gave up a couple runs over 4 innings in his debut. The White Sox going to counter with Shane Smith. He's 1-1 with a 2.30 ERA. Milwaukee took the opener last night 7-2. First pitch coming up at 6:40. Turn to the Bucks. They are officially in offseason mode following their blowing of a 7-point lead in the final 40 seconds of overtime last night to follow the Pacers in Game 5 of their series. It's the third straight year Milwaukee's gotten bounced in the first round of the playoffs. We got just one playoff series win since winning the NBA title in 2021. But Coach Doc Rivers says there is more to the story.
I'm discouraged that we lost in the first round. Obviously, no one ever tells you the whole story that Giannis in 3 years in a row, is that right? 3, right? Didn't play, but no one says that. And then this year we didn't have Dame Lillard, who's by all accounts is one of the greatest players to play the game. But we won't hear that story this summer. We'll hear that we've lost in the first round, and we'll live with that. But we know we like our team.
Bucks slated to do their exit interviews with players in the near future. A lot of people going to be focused on the future of Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
When a company only does business in Wisconsin, that's Wisconsin Strong. Rural Mutual provides all lines of insurance, including commercial, farm, home, and auto. And your premiums stay right here to keep Wisconsin strong. Local agents, local underwriters, local claims adjusters.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
Well, the Packers drafted 8 guys, signed more than a dozen undrafted free agents this past weekend. They'll get to see those guys on the field together for the first time this weekend as they hold their rookie minicamp in Green Bay. With this Wisconsin Sports Zone Network update, I'm Zach Heil, Print.
As far as the incident between Giannis and my pops, I had no idea it happened until I got to the back and was showed the video. Me and my pops have talked about that, and I don't agree with, what transpired there from him. I think basketball is basketball, and let's keep it on the court. And I think that he just, got excited, saw his son make a game winner and came on the court. But I think we had a conversation, and I think he just needs to just allow me to just play basketball, stay over there. I'll come to him to celebrate. But I think it's the emotions of the game just got excited there. But I talked with him. I'll talk with Giannis eventually about it. Just, I don't think that my pops was in the right at all there. And unfortunate, what happened in the end there. But, I mean, this series was a lot of war of words, a lot of war of antics, a lot of stuff going back and forth. And that's just part of, this rivalry and what we've built here over the last couple of years. And, it's unfortunate what happened there. But I think it's just competition. And as far as my pops, again, I don't agree what happened there. We'll have a conversation. Everybody's grown men, and we'll just go from there.
Ladies and gentlemen, from the great state of Brooklyn, Neil Diamond.
God bless you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Here's your host, Grant Bills.
Neil Diamond Week 2025, Day 3. What a week it's been. When people ask, where were you for Neil Diamond Week 2025? Well, we were talking about Dame Lillard's Achilles injury and then possibly some of the final games that Giannis ever played in Milwaukee, if you ask some. I actually am feeling pretty good about the chances that he stays. Maybe I'm naive. Is that the right word? Maybe I'm a simple-minded Bucks fan, and I don't fully grasp what's at play. But I'd argue the people most equipped to talk about this are Bucks fans because we listen to Giannis all the time. And as I've talked about the last couple of weeks, like, outside noise very rarely matches the inside noise in Milwaukee. Like, you listen to the shows and the talkers, it's like, this might be the offseason. Teams are circling. Teams are looking. Giannis's camp. And then I watch an interview with Giannis. He's like, they're going to have to strap a bomb to me to get me out of here. Okay, Jesus, first of all, morbid. But again, inside and outside realities very rarely match. So I think Bucks fans might be the most equipped to talk on this. I think most Bucks fans are like, yeah, it still seems like he might want to stick around. He really likes it here. How many times does he need to say it? Just saying. I might keep the Neil Diamond. The rest of the year. I can't do that. That's what makes this week special. Get back to taking your phone calls here if you have anything to say about the Bucks or the Brewers. 608-321-1670. Get back to your phone calls in about 10 minutes if you are interested. Jesse Temple at the very end of the show. We'll talk NFL draft and the Badgers' role in the draft or their lack of a role, which is more the story this week. I don't know if you heard on Over the Line is it yesterday, I think? What a 9 o'clock hour. Zach Heilprin in studio, Ben Kenny on the phone, Ebo playing traffic cop, talking about Paul Chryst, Jim Leonard versus Luke Fickell, which I thought, crazy me. Paul Chryst hasn't been here since 2022. I thought that war had ended, but a war that has been cold is fired back up between those two factions of Badgers fandom, the old school Chryst defenders and deniers, really, and then Luke Fickell people. So very interesting. We'll have that conversation with Jesse later on. I want to talk about what you just heard in the intro there, other than Neil Diamond. We'll keep talking Neil too, but that was Tyrese Haliburton talking about the incident after the game. These two teams, there's been a lot of emotion. Last year, if you'll remember, there was some incident with Giannis scoring his career high and setting a Bucks record, and then the Pacers taking the ball, which I think Giannis overreacted. Also, that should be Giannis's ball. And the Pacers, Rick Carlisle, who's got the facial behavior of Joe Biden, and I don't say that to be political. Joe Biden's just old, like it's a fact. And Rick Carlisle, we took the ball because I don't even remember who the player was. What's his nuts scored like 2 points. It was his first career bucket. You knew what you were doing, you bald prick. Oh, Mr. Underbite standing over on the side. That's personal. I shouldn't make fun of his appearance. He's a successful NBA coach. He makes a lot of money. That's what the money's for small-time radio hosts to compare you to a senile old man. But remember last year, the big incident after the game, and it was Giannis overreacted, and that just turned into something that it never should have. So the Bucks certainly without blame. Maybe the Bucks deserve more blame for what happened after that game last year. I don't know. We don't need to go back into it, but there's some history between these two teams. So when that game ended last night, my antennas were up. I'm like, is there something like they're going to shake hands? Let's see how this goes. And Giannis was very composed when he was going around shaking hands. He looked very calm. There was a little bit of a something or other with Benedict Mathurin, and then is it James Johnson, the guy who basically only exists now to be a tough guy on the bench? Like there were words being exchanged at that point. I'm like, all right, get off the court. You don't need to shake Benedict Mathurin's hand. That guy's a child. Like go to the locker room. But what I didn't see until after the fact, I only saw clips, was right when the game ended and Giannis is standing, not under the stanchion, but basically with his back to the basket. Tyrese Haliburton's dad, who I wouldn't have recognized, running out and getting in Giannis's face. And I don't think he was just waving the towel that had his son's name on it. There was something that was said that must have crossed some sort of line or pushed the envelope a little bit, because when you break down the film, Pat Connaughton walks in between them, and Pat kind of gives a look like, what did you just say? Turns around like, hey, man. And then Pat goes with Giannis like, let's get you out of here. So Tyrese Haliburton's dad getting in his face and then going head-to-head later after Giannis had done nothing. Giannis stood there and took it. He's very composed. And I'm not saying that, a lesser player would have punched him in the mouth. Like, maybe, I don't know, like Draymond Green might have. There may be a player or two in the NBA that would have knocked a tooth out. Maybe. But I think most players in that spot would have gone face-to-face. Oh, yeah, would you say? And then players would have broke them up, and it would have been like a baseball fight. Like, nothing would have happened. Again, there are a couple players in the NBA where something might have. But I think most players just would have gone nose to nose and hold me back, bro. Hold me back. And Giannis didn't even do that, to his credit. And then later circled around like Haliburton's dad is still out there. And I saw it without much context. And we were talking about it in a group chat. And it's like, well, Giannis needs to get out. Giannis needs to be an adult too. And I'm like, if the situation is involving someone who's not a coach or a player, I don't care what Giannis is doing. Like, they have no business being on the court. They shouldn't be there. So I don't care if Giannis threatened to murder this man's entire family, which he didn't. But let's say he did. Giannis, in my opinion, would still be in the right, because the guy's not a player. He has no business being there. So I was Team Giannis throughout, and then I saw the clip of Haliburton's dad as the game ended getting in his face. Look, I'd like to think Haliburton's dad regrets it. He tweeted an apology. He doesn't deserve to go to jail. He doesn't deserve to be rolled over the coals. I would assume, knows what he did was very wrong. Now, the Cavs or other teams might choose to be like, hey, man, like, we're not allowing you into games. Because if another fan did this, they'd have their tickets removed. They'd be banned from, like, there would be legitimate consequences. And there might be teams who who decide there are consequences for him, the league might even step in. But I'm not going to be dramatic and sit here and say jail's not bad enough. He deserves to be sent to El Salvador. Like, no, he made a mistake. He was caught up. He was emotional. It happens. Doesn't make it okay. My reaction to this, and I tweeted it out last night at Wisco Grant, if you want to follow me. I always plug my own Twitter because why not? Might as well. I just think players of this generation, and Tyrese Halliburton is Generation X, which I guess is my generation, or Generation Z, excuse me. Generation Z is people who are currently between 13 and 28, means they were born between 1997 and 2012. I was born in 98, so technically I'm at the tail end of the millennials, but it's tough for me. I don't really feel like a millennial. I don't really feel like Gen Z. It's something that I just live with, this lack of generational identity. But I guess Generation Z is probably my generation. I'm the tail end of millennial, the very beginning of Gen Z. It's players who are my age who really bother me. And it's their parents too. Players of that generation and their parents are more often than not causing problems and, in my point of view, detracting from the fan experience of the NBA. Look at someone like Ja Morant and his dad, who's fighting. Was he fighting Shannon Sharpe, or who was he trying to fight at games? He was putting himself in the middle of everything. Jason Tatum, who goes to have an x-ray against the Magic the other night, and his mom is in the tunnel saying, you want me to go into the Orlando locker room? You want me to go in there? No, you should not do that, Mom. Go back up to the luxury suite. If you want to come back down and check on your son, that's fine. If I was Jason Tatum, I'd be like, could I see you after the game? Like, I don't need the optics of you coming down here. But she technically wasn't breaking any rules. She wasn't being a bad parent. She was checking on her son. If I'm the NBA player, it's like, hey, Mom, I'm okay. I'm just getting an x-ray. We won the game. I actually can't remember if they won the game. That's beside the point. Could you wait with the rest of the family, and I will see you in 30 GD minutes. Can you please? And moms, I'll be sympathetic to moms. They love their kids. I'm not a parent, so I can't understand the feeling that you get when your son or daughter might be hurt or in danger. I understand that's a strong thing. I'm not downplaying that. Jason Tatum is an NBA superstar who makes millions of dollars. Like, can you please wait? Please wait up there. Please. So we've seen it from Tatum. We've seen it historically from Morant. And now we've seen it from Halliburton's dad, who, like, it would be one thing to jaw during a game at the bench. It'd be one thing to be in the tunnel making a scene. It's kind of a whole nother level. Not only to get on the court, which I think is kind of suspect. And remember, Jay Billis once upon a time said we should arrest those people. So I try not to be overly dramatic here, but Jay Billis is, pretty well-renowned comedy. He just said arrest all the people. So, okay. Those are some of the takes that have been previously thrown around on this subject. But running onto the court, not only going onto the court, but going up to getting in the face of a player, not only shouldn't it be allowed, but to me, it communicates this real lack of self-awareness and maturity and respect. And it's this lack of self-awareness and maturity and respect that seemingly is very common in this generation of players. And it's not all, but it seems to be a lot. And it detracts from my experience watching sports. Zion fits in this bucket too, where it's like, I'm the star. I make the money. I call the shots. Just don't tell me what I can and can't eat. Don't tell me which adult film stars I can and can't spend time with. Ja Morant, I'm the star. I make all the money. I call the shots if I want the coach fired. But in my spare time, I would like to play in strip clubs with guns, please. Thank you. Halliburton, who's a really gifted and fun player, kind of a throwback player. Like a distribution first point guard, very fun, who I'm not going to call him a front runner, because most players, when they make a big play or when they're winning, they're going to get excited. But it's this lack of respect. Like, you can talk smack and you can get physical. That's Giannis Antetokounmpo, who's first, second, third at worst best player in the league, NBA champion, 2-time MVP. There's a clear lack of respect there from son and parent that I think is all too common in this generation of players, and the parents who just get blinders on and they don't realize what they're doing. Like, I don't know what's missing in this generation of players. I don't know what's missing with their parents. I think we see it in youth sports a lot, all too often in youth sports, that players just are, or parents are completely and totally bananas. But at the pros, Like, or even in college, you would like to think that the parents are like, all right, Johnny Boy is 24 and making $80 million. Like, we can text him after the game or catch him before he gets on the bus. We don't need to be down there in the mix. And it's these Gen Z players and their parents. There's this real sense of entitlement and disrespect. And honestly, a lot of these players, I think John Morant's a good example. Halliburton is a less specific example, but it's like we want to act tough and we want to act like gangsters. Morant's a better example of this. I want to play with guns. Man, you're from the suburbs. You know what I mean? Like, the best example I can think of is like the Twin Cities. It's where my girlfriend is from. Twin Cities has a lot of suburbs. Milwaukee is a little too small to have like the classic suburbs. You go to the Twin Cities and, suburbs like Eden Prairie or Prior Lake, dozens of examples. It's like you live in the house, in the neighborhood where all the houses are kind of similar. And, like that's the environment that you grow up in. And then you get to the NBA and it's like, man, I'm going to get all tatted up and act like I'm something I'm not. Like, I don't know where it comes from with this generation of players. And it's not limited to this generation of players, but there's a lot of players in the NBA and in the NFL. The Packers just drafted one in Matthew Golden, who's like, you actually at one point like barely had a home and you really had to come up and go through something. And it's not fake. You know what I mean? Really had to fight and scratch and claw. And then there's this generation, the AAU generation, where there's this real lack of self-awareness and respect for those around you. And it seems to come from players who come from means, lived in the suburbs, played AAU, had their butts kicked or butts kissed, helicopter parents who have this real lack of self-awareness and respect for those around them. And it turns me off. And look, I can turn people off. I've said dumb things and done stupid things, but it seems to be condensed in this group. And it takes away from sports. It's lame. And you wonder why Europeans have been running this league, by the way, for the last 5 years. Like, you wonder why Giannis and Jokic are dominating. And I know Luka is different. Like, Luka's played professional sports basically since he could hold a basketball. He didn't come up through the projects. Well, I actually don't know. I assume at a certain point he had a pretty good upbringing just because he was so talented. But you wonder why European players are dominating this league is because they don't have these issues that a lot of and they're issues, by the way, of affluence. They're not issues of lack of education or lack of preparation or lack of coming from good homes. It's actually quite the opposite, which is what makes it so frustrating. And I think it detracts from sports. You don't have to agree. That's my take on the Halliburton thing. Sorry, I rambled a little long. I'll get your phone calls next. 608-321-1670 as Neil Diamond Week continues next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Yeah, that was Shaq was 100% wrong and stupid on that subject. I've never seen that. Number one, I want to thank Tyrese for coming out and apologizing. And then I want to thank his dad for coming out and apologizing. Like, I ain't never seen that before in my, I'm over 40 years in the NBA. I've never seen a parent, it was like AAU crap.
Yeah.
You know how much I hate AAU. It's like these parents, they think they can scream their kid to the NBA. It drives me flat crazy. But they apologize. And let me tell you something. Giannis is one of my favorite players. He became more of one of my favorite players last night because ain't no way in the hell I wouldn't have clocked his ass. There ain't no way I wouldn't have clocked him.
It's Charles Barkley on the Dan Patrick Show this morning. And I said last segment, all these people were saying, like, I'm surprised Giannis didn't knock his teeth out. Okay, there's maybe 2 or 3 people in the NBA, 2 or 3 players who would. I think most other players would go nose to nose with him, say, oh, yeah, what'd you say? And then players would separate, hold me back. It would be like a baseball fight. Barkley was definitely one of the players who would have clocked him back in the day. Oh, yeah, like Barkley would have thrown a right hook. I'm not surprised that Giannis didn't punch him. I'm a little surprised that Giannis just stood there and took it because that takes a lot. I gave you my take on John Halliburton. You can move on. It's not that big of a deal. That individual incident last night doesn't really bother me that much. It was annoying in the moment. I felt for Giannis in the moment. I thought he was very disrespected. But both sides talked it out. They apologized. You can move on. I assume that John Halliburton realizes that, like, yeah, that was probably dumb and feels bad. Although I've been listening to lots of Wisconsin sports radio stations today. It sounds like all of a sudden people got the green light to rip on this clown because he's been, refereeing and doing basketball stuff and really rubbing people the wrong way for a long time. I have no previous experience with him. It's not really last night that bugs me. It's this generation, it's this Gen Z, where all the suburb kids who played AAU want to act like gangsters and the parents want to get involved. And it's just this nightmare that I don't want in my professional sports. And maybe this is me getting older. And now the kids who are playing at a high level seem like kids, or they seem my age and they don't seem like adults. Well, I say this all the time. I want adults on my team. I don't want children. I don't want fake tough guys. I don't want kids from the suburbs who want to act like they're John Morant playing with guns. Man, I'm about it. Okay. You're from Eagan, man. And again, I need to use Twin Cities suburbs because that's my vernacular. But that's more what I'm annoyed with. Last night, I'll forget last night. Who cares? 608-321-1670. Back to the phones. Thank you for waiting. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Of course, it's Darnell here.
Hey, Darnell, what's up?
Yeah, I mean, thank goodness all the craziness happened after that game because that way we don't have to talk about what happened at the end of the actual game.
Right, yeah. Well, and now it's like, and now we talked about the offseason. Last night, it's getting lost that Giannis went for 30, 20, 10, 2, and 2. And Gary Trent Jr. fumbled the ball out of bounds. There's so much actual basketball things to talk about that we're kind of just ignoring.
Yeah, no one cares what actually happened now because, I mean, the result is what everyone wanted, which is the Bucks lost in the first round. And by everyone, I mean, big media, all that stuff, right? They wanted Giannis to lose. Now they can do their speculations on, is he going to leave? Is he not going to leave? And that's what all the talk shows are going to be for the next 6 months, right? Giannis, I mean, I don't really want to get into the John Halliburton stuff either, but
It happened.
My
I gave you a
God.
segment on it. I think if we go nuts over it tonight too much, then we're just kind of whining. It doesn't matter that much. Guy was stupid. I think he probably understands that, and I'm not going to lose sleep over it.
But yeah, just the gonads on Giannis though, like the restraint there,
Yeah.
just so impressive. Just proves everything that we know about him already, right? Which
Yeah.
is that he cares so much about basketball and about the city of Milwaukee and about all of this stuff that is so important, and he doesn't put up with idiots or people that are making complete fools of themselves.
Children, yes, or very immature adults, like I've been saying.
And then one other thing, Tony in Texas can probably talk a little bit further about this, but AAU culture is disgusting and awful, and everything that's wrong with sports right now. So, yeah, that is absolutely what is driving these idiots that are entering the NBA and just, pretending that they've got guns and whatever garbage, because they're allowed to do that. And also, if you've ever gone to an AAU tournament, I recommend against it, because it's just like two college prospects shooting the entire time, and then people throwing alley-oops and dunks.
And the sellies, and the cherry picking.
Yes. And the stepping over people and the trying to get their AI moment. It's terrible and stupid, and like I said, everything that's wrong with it. But yep, it's we move on now. It's baseball season, so
now it's baseball season, and we are equipped. This is a big week for the Brewers, as I'm trying to reiterate, but it's not exactly. This is a big week for the Brewers. Not exactly something that fills an entire hour of the show, but I'm doing my best to sprinkle it in. Look, I think there's many reasons why football is America's sport. And basketball is a purely American sport as well. Baseball is a little bit more global. Soccer, definitely more global. So football and basketball, very much sports of American creation. But I think America gravitates toward football for a lot of reasons. I think one of the reasons, and it's probably a ways down the list, but I think it's a reason, is, football coaches coach. They yell at guys. You go to football practice and you are shaped into a man. You know what I mean? The greatest football player of all time notoriously was chewed out by his coach constantly. After he had won multiple Super Bowls, Belichick is up his butt. Would never happen in the NBA. And it probably shouldn't happen nearly as much as it did in New England. Brady's a unique case. But young men who go to football practice are coached and pushed hard and disciplined. You go to an AAU tournament, it's like, hey, let's take a field trip to this big city. We're going to stay in the hotel and dick around, and then we're going to go see if we can get some YouTube highlights for the likes of Evan Flood. And that's not a shot at Evan Flood, by the way. I love Evan Flood. Does really good work. But like the people who go, did you see what happened on the AAU circuit this weekend? Like, no, I didn't. I washed my hair. I shampooed my rug. Lots of other things. And by the way, it's not the kids' fault. They're being done a disservice. The way we've shaped the sport and the culture of the sport. And now we're seeing it bleed into the NBA. It's this generation. It's Generation Z kids who are fake tough guys with helicopter parents. And it's not becoming at all. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
I can't believe it's been 5 years.
Rico, you hate Neil Diamond Week.
Sucks, and please let this week die.
It's just 1 week. It's just 1 week.
Nope, it sucks. I'm dying on that hill.
I mean, you could die on
Let
the
it
hill.
go. Let that gag die, please. I'm serious. I'm begging you.
The more that the few, this just adds to the bit, is the small group of people that detest Neil Diamond Week. That only makes Neil Diamond Week better. So I actually thank you for your service.
Hey, I just got to say in the video, I made the cut. So my tweet made the cut.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. You need to take that video back up. That's funny.
How you been?
I'm doing good. It's my favorite week of the year. I'm doing great, Rico.
No. The record Edmund Fitzgerald week is better.
Well, that's not a full week. That's just a day. But that's pretty lit too. Don't get me wrong.
So anyhow, I'm sorry. Are you still upset that the Brewers aren't as good as you hoped they were?
Well, they haven't been as good as I hoped so far. We are not. I don't.
God.
Rico, I don't know if you've ever heard this expression, but allow me to illuminate you. You can't win the division in April, but you can lose it. They're not losing it. They're also not doing a ton to win it, it feels like, at this moment in time.
Do they have any starting pitching? No.
Yeah, I think they do. Come on. I think their big issue is third base,
Quintana's the
shortstop.
only thing they got that's been working.
Third base, shortstop. That's their problem. That's their huge, and it's a big problem. Vinny Capra is a black hole. Joey Ortiz is a black hole. I still don't think Caleb Durbin is that good. I know he's been a fun little story, and maybe he can be a fine player, but he's not nearly close to what they need, I think, at that position.
And one last thing, I'm not really an NBA guy, but this was going to happen. So, just after today, it's pretty much should be done.
I love how
the Bucks.
That's okay, Rico. I love how people on the phone lines and on the live stream are like, well, at least now we don't have to talk about the Bucks anymore. Look, I found this to be a very engaging and interesting show. Yes, we knew this was going to happen, but we didn't necessarily think it was going to like that. And we didn't think the opposing star's dad was going to come on the floor and mix it up. And we got to kick around what comes next in the offseason. I actually am pretty optimistic that Giannis is going to stick around. And I will say, Darnell mentioned the talk shows, and they're going to be talking about Giannis for months and months and months. Yeah, but you know what? If Giannis sticks it through this and stays in Milwaukee, like, I don't think any of those shows should ever get to talk about Giannis leaving ever again. Because if it's not happening this offseason, you know what I mean? Like, it probably will just never happen. And it could happen this offseason. I'm not in denial about it, but I don't think it's a foregone conclusion. A lot of people are talking about it like it's a foregone conclusion. I don't think it is. Plus, and maybe we could talk about this next, like, where's he going to go where he has a sure shot better chance at a title? There's maybe a destination or two, sure, but will those destinations want to pay the price to get him? And if they do, is the price that they will pay so enormous that Giannis's chances once he arrives actually won't be that great? Brand new coach, new city, new teammates, chemistry. I don't know. Everyone's like, well, if Giannis wants to win, he's got to leave. Correct. Possibly. But we always talk like, well, if he goes here, I mean, they're a surefire contender. Have you not watched Kevin Durant the last 5 or 6 years? Like, are we completely new to this? So maybe we could talk about that idea a little bit next. And Jesse Temple going to join Stuck Badgers in the final segment of the show. A lot more still to come. Don't touch that dial. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes after these words.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 5 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
We're always so quick to question, is his time up? Where should he go? I just think, where's he going to go? Like, what is his fit? You ain't just going from leading and having the ball in your hands and scoring 50s to go having a singular role. Right. Whoever gets him, you bring him there for what we're seeing from Milwaukee. Yeah. So you got to have pieces that actually fit around him. That's why I'm asking what situation.
If you could just wave a magic wand to be like, yo, it would be dope to see Giannis here, just in case it doesn't work out, just in case it's time to leave. What would that place be for you?
Unless you go young, unless you go on the team up with LaMelo Ball or somebody.
So Charlotte is a destination for you?
I don't think no place is a destination for him. He got to get people to him.
You don't trade players like Giannis. Like, you say that.
Nah, you build around that. And the more that you see that he needs help, you go get that help that he needs. You don't just give up on that. Me understanding Giannis' mentality, he want to win.
Yeah.
So he's not going to go to not a loser situation, but a rebuild.
Right.
As long as you have Giannis, you got to build around him to compete and win. And if you just let that go, then you up. We've never seen a Giannis before. We've seen 6'9", 6'10", 6'11 guys. A lot of them was one-dimensional. We haven't seen that from Giannis at that position. You don't just get rid of that. You figure that out. If you want the easy way out, then you get rid of
Girl, you'll be your woman.
Welcome back. That's Carmelo Anthony, actually. I thought there were some really good points in there. Other than the point being like, well, Charlotte with LaMelo Ball makes sense. It's like, what? So the ball dominant point guard who also gets hurt a lot. Now he's younger. Like, you want him to bet. We thought Giannis and Dame was going to be some magical fit, and it hasn't been. So you want to just try that again with, you think Giannis, by the way, I get, look, I don't want to speak on Giannis's behalf or assume things on Giannis's behalf, but like, do you think Giannis is going to vibe with that circus? And I say that, I guess, not as an insult. Sounds like an insult to LaMelo Ball, but there's a lot going on there. There's a lot of flash. There's a lot of pop. You think that's going to, who have been the best players to ever play alongside Giannis and succeed? It's a very simple question. It's Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday. In what world are either of those two remotely comparable to LaMelo Ball? Chris Middleton would wear a hoodie and sweatpants down the tunnel. Drew Holiday barely spoke, very quiet, very soft-minded, mild-mannered. Got his wife, got his family. Like, I don't know. There's just certain things. So the LaMelo Ball, put the LaMelo Ball thing to the side. Carmelo Anthony, like, saying, okay, but where's he supposed to go? Like, where's this magical team? He's like, he arrives and he's instantly a title contender. You know what I mean? The Cavs, maybe. The Cavs are very good and have players all over the place. Okay, if you were to swap him, let's say, for Evan Mobley, maybe. Okay. Boston shouldn't be interested. The Bucks wouldn't be interested in doing that. The Pistons, maybe. But the thing is, with some of these teams that are like 5th, 6th seed, young and on the come up, so like the Pistons or the Rockets, I know they're the 2 seed, but they kind of go in similar buckets to me. On the come up, let's say the Pistons and the Rockets. Okay, you add Giannis into that group of the young core. First of all, I think young cores with older superstars can sometimes be a little overrated. We thought LeBron with LaMelo Ball and Brandon Ingram or Lonzo Ball and Brandon Ingram, and they just weren't. First of all, those players weren't nearly as good as we thought they were going to turn out to be, which is the case with most young players. But also, there's a big disconnect. LeBron, the standards that he has, winning titles, executing things in a certain way. You can't just roll in with a bunch of 23, 24-year-olds and expect that to just hit the ground running as a finals contender. So the age thing is one thing, but if the Bucks and Giannis decide to part ways and the Bucks ship him off to one of those spots, you know what the Bucks are going to want in return? Rightfully so. A lot of those good young players and a lot of the picks. So now Giannis goes to a team that's been stripped of some of its best assets, both on the court and off. So now if the Rockets are like, all right, now we need a couple pieces to put us over the edge with Giannis, they don't have the ammo. Right? Oklahoma City could be interesting. I think that city could be a fit. The culture of that team might just be a fit. But if Oklahoma City wins the title this year, are they going to be interested in that? They got more picks than they know what to do with. So maybe they're like, we have so much. What are we even hoarding our money for? What are we worried about? You know what I mean? It's like you win a $10 million lottery. It's like, man, I've always wanted that $90,000 Audi. It's like, well, buy it. What do you... Well, I don't want to spend too much money. You have enough. You have enough picks. You have enough players. So to me, the appetite is more the question there with Oklahoma City. But there aren't just a ton of teams. You know what team probably fits best, honestly? The Pacers. You put him on the Pacers. You just swap him and Siakam. But you know where he's never going to go is the Pacers. So I just don't know. Everyone says, well, if Giannis wants to win, he's got to leave. Okay. But there's been plenty of superstars that have believed the grass to be greener, and then they get there and it's more of the same. Or there's atrophy. There has seemed to be atrophy with Kevin Durant every step of the way. Atrophy or entropy? I actually think both words apply. I think the word I was trying to use is entropy, like things slowly falling apart. But atrophy also fits, like his career has atrophied while his situation is entropied. God, I'm a genius. Listen to me. Let's take a call. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Ridge Runner Mark, how we doing?
Hey, Ridge Runner. I'm great. How about you?
Not too shabby. Bummed about the Bucks, but if we look at it big picture, were they going anywhere? Probably not.
Correct.
I find it fascinating that everybody outside of Wisconsin has this interesting narrative of, well, Giannis wants to leave because that's quote unquote what he thinks is his best way to win championships. When that's really that's a player-by-player basis, and there's plenty of players that have said, hey, I need to go somewhere else to win a championship. So far, Giannis has never said or acted like he wants to leave Milwaukee. Yes, he wants championships. He wants multiple ones, but he's never even remotely said anything that makes you think that. The ESPNs of the world are like, oh, well, we know he likes the Knicks. Does he? Has he said anything?
Yeah.
Well, he's going to want to. Why is he going to want to? When has he ever shown that to you? I did see something rather odd. I wasn't sure if it was true or not. Some dude on X, I saw it posted on Facebook on ESPN Milwaukee, that he basically said today on Cosmo TV or some crazy thing that if the GM called him up and said, hey, we're going to move you, he goes, I'd do my job, but they'd have to drag me out of here or something along those lines. I don't know if you know that as well.
He said they'd have to like blow me out of here with a bond. Like, yeah, he's made comments like that before. Yeah.
Yeah. So I always struggle with the ESPNs of the world because they're basically saying, well, we got to generate looks. We got to generate people and this. So we're going to say something that the rest of the country wants to hear. Oh, well, as soon as we say Giannis wants to leave, New York Knicks like, oh, maybe Giannis will come here. Or, the Cavs, oh, maybe Giannis will come here. And that'll just get more clicks, more people watching, more money in. Where it's because it's not really based in any sort of factual information that they've dug up.
And again, what I've said, Ridge Runner Mark, and I think we're singing the same song here, which I love. The outside noise with Giannis has very rarely ever matched the inside noise. You look outside the house, it's panic. It's mania. And then you listen to Giannis's interview. It's like, oh, that kind of doesn't really sound like a guy that wants to leave. He might leave this offseason. And maybe it's best for both parties. But if he doesn't want to leave, I'm certainly not chasing him out the door. And I would bet against him leaving because every bit of evidence he's ever shown us has probably told us that he's not interested in leaving. The ESPNs of the world, whatever. It's just so rare for a player, I think, to be so hyper-focused on being good and winning. Because, again, we have a league of children now that want to shoot finger guns and, bring their parents onto the court. Oh, Giannis says he wants to win a championship. Yeah, what a novel idea. What a misfit in this league. Let's take a break. We'll come back. A little bit of a change-up. Jesse Temple going to join us to talk about the NFL draft and the Badgers' role in it, or more accurately, their lack of a role in it this last weekend. Now, a couple Paul Chryst guys did very well. Chimere Dike and not Paul Chryst himself, but Graham Mertz was drafted. So there's that. We'll wrap up hour number 2, day number 3 of Neil Diamond Week on the Wisco Sports Show next with Jesse Temple.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Wisco Sports Show, going to get right into our weekly spot with Jesse because we're running low on time. Couple topics that we hit about the NFL draft and the Badgers' kind of limited role in it this last weekend, how that's going to impact the program, and his final thoughts coming out of spring ball and the spring showcase on Billy Edwards Jr., their new quarterback as well. Here's our conversation. We'll wrap up with this. Jesse Temple is here covering the Badgers, and you can hear him on the Camp Excellent podcast with Zach this week. And I talked to Zach this morning, and Jesse, I don't know if you've noticed this, but there is an active war going on in Badgers fandom. It had been a cold war for a little while, but the Christ and Fickle crowds are now firing bullets again. It's active because of how the draft went this last weekend. So is that something that you've seen online? I'm sure you discussed this on the camp with Zach.
We talked about it on the camp. Otherwise, no, I can't say it's been at the forefront of my mind, but it's
Sure.
April and we need stuff to talk about. So this is great.
That's true. A player like Chimere Dike going high in the draft, or Graham Mertz, what was your reaction just seeing those names come off the board when they came off in relation to some Badgers who are, more Luke Fickell guys who went later?
Well, I'm happy for someone like Graham Mertz, who went through an awful lot and was considered the savior. But I'd also say if he had stayed at Wisconsin, it seems highly unlikely to me that he would have been an NFL draft pick. So ultimately, he made the smart decision by moving on and going to Florida. And 2 years ago, he had a great year. He had 20 touchdowns and 3 interceptions, obviously dealt with the injury this past season. I do suppose that it means this previous staff did a very good job of identifying talent. I felt that way for a long time, in the way they could find players and move them to different positions, and then they became NFL guys. And Chimere Dike put up similar numbers to what he did at Florida this past season a couple years ago at Wisconsin. Then they changed offenses, and he was less of a focal point, and they were just doing some different things. So, I mean, it's good for those two, obviously. They made the right decision by going to Florida.
So that's a very good answer for you and very supportive of the player. Let's build up the players who were drafted instead of looking for a reason to tear somebody down. I was talking with Zach about this earlier today, and Ben, who was on with Ebo on Monday morning, brought this up too. What a fun segment to listen to that was, talking about a player like Jack Nelson or NFL type players, or now NFL players who have been kind of here throughout the last couple of years, and how much maybe they were hurt by the turnover at offensive line coach or offensive coordinator. Now Longo is out and Jeff Grimes is in. Like, maybe we've learned a lesson in the importance of continuity in the development of college players.
Continuity has always mattered, man, especially.
Maybe I learned the lesson. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, they went through 4 offensive line coaches in as many seasons, and the transition to Jack Bicknell Jr., obviously, in that offense was a disaster. You're asking offensive linemen who were recruited under a different staff to do something they had not been used to. So I have no doubt that matters. And look at Joe Rudolph and how long he was at Wisconsin as an O-line coach, and now what he's able to do at a place like Notre Dame, when you can develop relationships on the recruiting trail and you're still there 3 and 4 years later and you build them up over the course of time. It's still different from what it used to be, but that's the nature of college football in the transfer portal era. I do think, though, that continuity might have a lot to do with guys willing to stick around a little bit longer and develop if they see a path to playing time.
Well, and that was going to be my follow-up question. I think for the blue chip players, the best of the best, first, second round players, those guys are going to make their way to the NFL anyways. But this new era of college football where guys are moving around a lot more often, it's harder to develop now. You just spoke on continuity, but how does a player like Jack Nelson or players, previously like Van Ginkel just got a huge deal? Like, he was someone who took a path and took a long time to develop. How do players like that in this era of college football develop in a system that's, it doesn't feature as much continuity as it probably should for players like that?
It's much more challenging, and I can't blame any of them for going to a place for 2 years, seeing they are not playing immediately and wanting to go somewhere else. You have to be willing to start over and hope that you can work your way into a role. But this is just where we're at with college athletics, and in particular, the basketball and football side of the things. It makes winning at a place like Wisconsin that much more challenging, because I've said all along, I think that this impacts Wisconsin in a more significant way than it does maybe some other schools. Not to say that every school isn't impacted, but what made Wisconsin special for so long, it was that you could find someone who was under-recruited and develop them over time. Or if you were a highly recruited guy and you didn't pan out as a freshman, you could still develop there. And you're more apt to leave now if it doesn't work out. And so one of Wisconsin's greatest advantages traditionally is not the same.
So Wisconsin, basically my whole lifetime, has put guys into the NFL draft without fail, even if they're not high first-round players. Like, good, solid pros have been going into the league. And I don't have an agenda against Fickell, but if they have a couple more years like this where there's no one really going in the draft, how does that impact recruiting? Because you can't look a recruit in the face and say, hey, we'll get you to the league, because that hasn't really been the case like it was for so long.
I think we have to be honest and say it absolutely will impact recruiting. It doesn't mean you're not going to get players because you're a Big Ten program and you have a lot to offer in terms of opportunity on the field and monetarily with potential revenue sharing coming up. But I think of the recruits that I talked to, take linebacker Mason Posa, for example, who's coming in here this summer as a 4-star kid. And he talks about, he didn't know anything about Wisconsin at first. He's from New Mexico. And then he did his research, and he specifically mentioned guys like Andrew Van Ginkel and Zach Bond. He didn't watch him at Wisconsin. He didn't know anything about him, but he watches him in the NFL because, like you said, Van Ginkel's getting paid, and Bond very well could have been the defensive player of the year. And you see TJ Watt, and that helps other guys want to come to a place like Wisconsin because they see the path forward. Even like Leo Chanel, Nick Herbig. Oh, you can go there for 3 years and then be in the NFL. If you go years and you got no one, then I don't know what you fall back on.
I'm trying to come up with ideas, what you could pitch. But that's been a big part of the Badgers pitch for a long time. College football is changing, so Wisconsin no doubt will have to change with it. Jesse Temple is here. Listen on the camp, really good episode with Zach this week. One question, big picture about spring ball and the spring showcase. Did you have any different thoughts about Billy Edwards Jr. for better or worse compared to Tyler Van Dyke or Mordecai the last 2 years?
That's a good question. I think Billy was kind of uneven during spring ball. He had really strong moments, and I think that there were enough moments where he made a poor throw that make you wonder what it's going to look like next season. And it's not that he doesn't know that has to be cleaned up. But I would also say when we're privy to every practice, it means you're watching a lot of throws. So there are going to be more interceptions. There are going to be more errant throws because you're trying new things with a new group and a new offense. So I don't want to make some broad declaration about what spring practice means. I would probably put Tanner Mordecai first among those 3 quarterbacks in terms of overall skill set. We didn't get a chance to see it in full because he got hurt, but you saw what he did in the ReliaQuest Bowl. He just cut it loose, and that was as good as you'll see a Wisconsin quarterback. Tyler Van Dyke will never really know, but I think Billy Edwards Jr. has a chance to do some good things at Wisconsin. It's just, as his quarterbacks coach Kenny Guyton said, can you limit the disaster decision is how he put it, that's a big word or talking point in the quarterback room.
So that's our conversation with Jesse from earlier today. That was not a ringing endorsement of Billy Edwards Jr. And I don't want to put words in Jesse's mouth because I know that Jesse's not trying to come on here and be like, Billy Edwards Jr. kind of sucked. Like I know that's not what he was saying. But that's what I heard. Sorry, Jesse. That's what I heard. I wish that Mordecai would have been healthy all year. And I certainly wish that Tyler Van Dyke would have been healthy all year. Because I think if he would have been, they'd probably be one of or both Oregon and Penn State. And I think we'd feel differently. I think we'd feel significantly different about this program if those things had happened. And the only thing that really would have changed last year is a healthy quarterback. So maybe we shouldn't feel different, but we would. Because the results matter. The scoreboard and the record matters. And it should matter above all else. So I hope that this is not another year of, well, here's this random recruit quarterback or transfer quarterback. But if he stays healthy, that would be an improvement on both of the last 2 guys. That's basically all he has to do is just stay healthy and you will be better than the last 2 guys. Day number 4, Neil Diamond Week tomorrow. Thank you for listening, as always.